The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure to speak briefly to this bill and in support of it on behalf of the NDP caucus. I'm lucky to have a bit of a personal I guess, window into the importance of this issue, in that my constituency assistant, Rena Davis, was a recipient of a kidney just over a year ago. And I knew her in the years as her kidney functioning was failing, and yet she was still a very inspiring example of a Nova Scotian living to the very fullest of her capacities. We first met when she was a volunteer yoga instructor at Beef House when I was executive director there. And for quite a long time, I didn't know that she was facing this particular challenge as her kidney functioning was decreasing. But then I stumbled on her blog where she wrote about her experience and gained some insight into, I guess, the anxiety, the sense of lack of control, and just that tremendous, the tremendous ache of being in need of something and not knowing if it would come. And I know that is the experience of many people who are waiting for organs as a result of various conditions. And I think if this bill lives up to its potential, what we are, you know, at a moment of doing is really increasing the capacity of many Nova Scotians to spend a shorter time in that waiting period, because we hope that there will be greater ease in connecting willing donors, suitable donors, with Nova Scotians who are in need. So I am certainly in support. Organ and tissue donation is something that most of us have the privilege of not needing to think about on a regular basis. Most of us don't expect that we will ever need one, or perhaps that we will ever be in a position to give one. But the need is significant. There are currently 186 people in Atlantic Canada awaiting organ donations, 125 in Nova Scotia. And across the country and in our province, there is a critical shortage of donors. And the reasons for that are somewhat complex. Only some individuals would qualify as donors depending on how they die and what kind of health they are in at that moment. And then not every donor is the right match for a recipient. But perhaps most significantly, suitable donors are not always identified, and their wishes are not always acted on. So this change in legislation, which changes our current opt-in system to an opt-out system, should go some distance towards remedying that situation, and it really should be a point of pride for us to be the first jurisdiction in Nova Scotia to be an opt-in system. There is another part of this equation, though, and that needs considering. And certainly, this is a conversation that is taken up a lot of our time in this House, and which is will be of no surprise to any Nova Scotian, which is there are real concerns about the capacity of our healthcare system. So do we have the health professionals, the equipment, the training, insufficient supply to ensure an effective system for handling an increased number of transplants? We know from experience that even the most positive of policy changes can create a burden on a system if they're not also matched with investment. So we've talked about this in the context of the government's plan to improve ambulance response times, because in isolation, while that seems like a good thing, there are concerns about how our already overwhelmed emergency rooms might handle an increased patient flow. And there's no question that our health system at this moment is at its capacity and beyond its capacity. And so it would be useful to know what, if any, planned investment will accompany this bill. to accommodate an increase in organ donors. And another question raised by this legislation is who will be considered an eligible donor. Members of the LGBTQ community are expressing concern about discrimination in the organ and tissue donation process and whether gay men in particular will face restrictions under the new legislation. After about 25 years of not being a blood donor, I became a blood donor again. I had traveled and that ruled me out for some time. And then I was a mom and just incredibly busy and incredibly tired. And it took me a while to sign up again. But after a period of time where a family member needed many, many pints, I made it a priority and I became a donor again. And while I was already at MLA. And it's an incredibly moving thing, actually, to go to sign up there and sit there with people waiting for blood to come out of your body. And I always feel a little bit hesitant, as much as I want to share that I'm doing that and maybe promote some of the stories that I hear there, which are very moving. And it's just a very humble, it's a very humble and very genuine space where people are showing up to give what they can give out of the goodness of their heart. And it's such a great thing about our healthcare system that is done freely. But at the same time, the fact that so many of our fellow citizens are not able to participate in that makes me actually quite hesitant to talk about it. And I think I have some similar hesitations and about this bill. So we have some important questions, but on the whole, this is an encouraging step for our province to be taking, and I hope it will inspire other jurisdictions to switch to an opt-out system so that we can reduce the national number of people dying while waiting for organ and tissue transplants to zero, and that would certainly be a good thing for us all. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.